Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of Net Gains, our podcast by PadelStars, which is going to cover all things paddle, business and startups. And if you are someone who follows everything paddle, you cannot have missed seeing our guest today on the recent show of The Apprentice. Everybody, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Max to the show.
Brilliant. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's lovely to have you. And for those that haven't been watching The Apprentice and have no idea what I'm talking about, how about you share a little bit about your backstory, how you got involved in paddle and what made you apply for The Apprentice?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a crazy year. So I have just finished The Apprentice. So I was fired, unfortunately, from the show a few weeks ago. Spoiler alert, sorry about that for any listeners. But for me, I come from a tennis background. I played to a high level in the UK. I was kind of playing on the lower level of the future circuit many years ago now. And then I have a really vivid recollection really of when I realized I wasn't quite good enough to be a tennis player, and that's when I played Dan Evans in a futures event. So Dan Evans went on, I think he was top 20 at some point, but he was a top tennis player. Wasn't at the time, but was still very talented at the time, and he just absolutely smoked me. And I remember it's the only tennis match I ever played where I came off court very aware that he seemed to be in like gear 2 maybe, and had so many more levels. And I just realized at that point, even though I was wanting to become a professional tennis player, you have to be kind of top 100 in the world to do that. And it just became very apparent that I wasn't quite there. And, fortunately, I had continued education. So I was studying at the University of Bath at the time. I was doing my master's degree. So really then, went into the working world. And what I was finding, balancing a 9 to 5 on 9 to 6, my level of tennis was coming down, but my competitiveness was staying the same. And I was playing people that I thought I could beat and was losing to them. And I guess for a period of time, kind of fell out of love with tennis to some extent. Okay. Got into endurance sport. So did some marathons. I did a full distance Ironman. Went a little bit crazy doing all of those things. But actually it was a friend of mine who played tennis. He was playing paddle, a guy called Nick Hatchett. So he's on the GB team at the moment, and he's done a really good job of getting us former tennis players playing paddle. And I just fell in love with the sport. So trying to play as much as I possibly can, but obviously paddle in the UK is really just at the start of its journey. If you look at Spain, I think it's now the second most played sport in Spain. So it's above tennis, but just behind football, which is mad when you think you've got the likes of Carlos Alcaraz, you've had Rafa Nadal, you've had all of these amazing tennis players that have come from Spain to now say that paddle is the preferred sport to some extent in Spain is indicative of where the sport kind of is really. And as I say, in the UK, we are just starting to see that boom. We're just starting to see centres pop up. And yeah, my master's degree was in business. I've always been a businessman, and started looking at the financials, the commercials behind what it would take to open my own paddle centre. That's my long-term goal. That's what I want to do. It's why I went on The Apprentice. That's what my business plan was about. I am also selling my own line of Max Paddle rackets, which are going really, really well. I'm actually out of stock at the moment, as has been the demand. Yeah. But yeah, it's been fantastic. Like I always say, if you can do for work what you love, it never really feels like work. And that's really what it feels like at the moment. Now I'm in this paddle space. And
it's super bold that you went on something like The Apprentice. It's super bold wanting to start your own business, but then to go on a public platform and share that, with the nation is, hats off to you. How did you hear about the opportunity? Was there any hesitation in taking the leap and applying to be on the show?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of hesitation. I think you used the word bold, perhaps silly. It could have also been. But look, I've always watched The Apprentice. Always grown up watching it. Always thought, oh yeah, I'd like to have a pop at that and maybe be on it one year. And my wife, I think it was on New Year's Eve, suggested, look, you're looking for investment into paddle centres. Why don't you apply for The Apprentice? And it actually kind of started off. There was merit behind the business plan, but the apprentice element of it was a a bit of kind of tongue in cheek to start with. But then as I started getting through the rounds and that application became more of a reality, it became a lot more serious, a lot more quickly, right? And I think for me, it was never about the TV element of it. It was always about the business side of things and getting that investment. And I think to some extent as well, my business plan being around Padel, and Padel still being very new in the UK, like the amount of people that come up to me and they say, oh, paddle boarding, they don't necessarily understand what paddle or paddle tennis is, right? So it was an opportunity to get in, to help get paddle, not that it needs it, but to the mainstream to some extent. And it was amazing. I mean, the Apprentice, the tasks, everything about it was such a good experience. I thoroughly enjoyed myself. I think there are 18 candidates, me being one of them, and one of the nicest things that came from the show was that everyone really, really got on. I mean, it's a cutthroat show, and you have to fight your corner, and you're going after each other at points. And it can get quite frosty, but there was always that respectful element between everyone. I always think that's so important to kind of be able to compartmentalize that business and personal side of it. What a ride.
And I think, the paddle industry as a whole, like anything that raises awareness is great. So, I'm sure like for all paddle operators, actually, we really, really appreciate like you going out there, because just that thing about paddleboarding, like I ran a poll on my LinkedIn once and about what do you think of when you hear the word paddle? And I think I put paddle tennis and paddleboarding like 1 times 5.
Yeah. And ironically, the week that I got fired from The Apprentice, it was a TV selling task, and one of the items that we had was a kayak, and we had our paddles on the kayak, so I had to take a bit of heat in the boardroom for being the paddle guy and not knowing how to operate the paddle in the kayak.
Brilliant.
But it was interesting because Lord Sugar's a tennis player himself, and chatting with him in the boardroom, he's aware of the growth of paddle. He is really interested in it as an area. He's also interested in pickleball, which will boom. I've got no doubt about in the UK. It's not quite seeing the traction that paddle's seeing at the moment, but look, he's aware of it. And as you said, I think it's the more people we can make aware of paddle and the opportunities behind paddle, the better for our sport, right?
Yeah. And could you share a bit more about your transition from tennis to business? Like, what sort of motivated this shift, and how do you find that your experiences on sort of the tennis circuit are now impacting how you are running your business? Or
absolutely. I think sport and business, there are so many similarities, right? I would say with sport, there's a huge goal setting element of it. So let's take paddle at the moment, or maybe my paddle, right? I've got a target by the end of the year to be top 50 in the UK. And as of November last year, I was 600 in the UK. So it's a bit of a stretch target for me, perhaps.
Love it, stretch goals.
Yeah, absolutely love it. But you have to push yourself for these targets in sport. You have to push yourself to stretch targets in business. There's so much crossover, and I've always been, always liked to have thought of myself as an entrepreneur. I hate that word. I would never really refer to myself as it per se, but like I've always thought of myself as a businessman. I've always been curious about the finances and the commercials behind businesses. And, my dad actually started up his own business as well. So I had a lot of really, really good learnings from him. He's a physicist, so I'm not unfortunately intelligent enough to understand half the stuff he says, but the business sides of it were fascinating to me. And really good learnings kind of going into what I'm doing now. I think going back in terms of my story from tennis into business, I mentioned the Dan Evans story, and I also mentioned that I was at university at the time. So my first kind of real job in e-commerce I had through a contact that I'd made through tennis. So it's another really good link. Sport can really create really good relationships with different people, and I was fortunate in that position to be given a job in an area that I knew nothing about. I hadn't had any e-commerce experience at the time, but I think he'd seen my application to tennis, my application to sport, and the way I conduct myself, and thought, you know what, I'm going to give this guy a shot and trust that he'll learn on the job and pick things up quickly, which is exactly what I did. So yeah, in terms of going from sport into business, e-commerce is where the majority of my kind of business career has been, specifically on Amazon marketplaces. So I've been really fortunate enough to work with some really big brands. Firstly, from agency side, the likes of Coca-Cola, the BBC, Lily's Kitchen, some real household names, which, again, I feel really fortunate to be able to have worked with them, to learn from some of the founders themselves, and kind of take those learnings into the other things that I do in life. I then moved from agency side to brand side, and I was working for a leading sports nutrition brand called Bulk, again managing their Amazon business. So they're a multi-million-pound business. Amazon's a big part of what they do, as is the case with so many businesses, right? And for me, that was a real, I guess, turning point in my career, because I mentioned I've always been business minded. I've always wanted to look at the kind of commercial aspects and make decisions based on the quantitative data that I'm seeing. Sometimes it's quite difficult to do that agency side. So for me, it was really important to go and work for a brand to get into the real nitty gritty of the details. So things like product margin and where I need to be putting my budget and my spend and managing profit and loss accounts. Like, my time at Bulk really taught me all of that and all of those skills. I was, again, really fortunate to work with some amazing people. My line manager at the time, a guy called Mark Sherwood, he's been at that company for so long. And like, I'm so thankful for the amount of learnings I got from him, because he was one of those people where he really took the time to make sure that you understood what you were doing and gave you the autonomy to grow and learn and ask questions. And I think that's so important to do if you're line managing someone. And I really don't think I'd be here today had it not been for a lot of his guidance. And digressing somewhat, but from Bulk, from the e-commerce world, and then it was in and around that time that I started playing Padel. And I think with all of those learnings I'd had along my journey, I just thought, it's time to see what I can do to
light bulb moment.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, here we are today.
And actually, it's really interesting what you say about, sport opening that door for you ultimately. Yeah. And that's what you're hearing a lot about Padel. Like, it's like the new networking, the new golf, deals are being done across the net. Yeah. Is that something you've seen?
Yeah, definitely. I think my take on it, one of the reasons why Padel's growing so quickly is it's such a sociable sport, right? Mm-hmm. Like, if you look at it compared to tennis, you're on a smaller court, so you can talk, for one. It's quite difficult to shout from baseline to baseline in tennis, right? It's different in Padel. And yeah, as I said, there's 4 of you, and there's a real positive culture of kind of playing Padel and then sticking around for a drink or to go to the cafe afterwards, or, Pilates and Padel is something I'm seeing a lot of at the moment. Like, there's a real social networking element to Padel that perhaps you don't necessarily get with other sports. I think you can get it with tennis. I certainly saw that firsthand with tennis. There's doubles, but I think certainly at a kind of entry level or beginner standard, Padel is a lot easier to start playing. Like, I often make the comparison between the tennis serve and the Padel serve. Like, the tennis serve is one of the most technical things you can do in any sport, in my opinion. Like, you really need expert coaching and to hone that skill. With Padel, you just serve underarm. So really anyone
There's no intimidation, is there, really?
Precisely. So really anyone can pick up a racket, start playing, and even if it's your first time, the quality of your output in minute 1 compared to at the end of the hour can be night and day. So it's really exciting.
Yeah. And you've got an open audience here. How about you share a little bit about your business vision? And you didn't really get to talk about your business plan on The Apprentice. Yeah. So I'd love to give you the opportunity to share a little bit about that. Yeah,
absolutely. Like, my long-term goal and what I was on the Apprentice for is to get investment to open my own Padel centre. So a 5-6 court indoor centre is what I'm shooting for from the get-go, and hopefully franchise that out into several other centres. And I think one thing that's really critical in the UK is coaching. I think, again, similarly to how we are as a sport, we're still kind of in the early stages of coaching in the UK. there are some fantastic coaches, don't get me wrong. I think, you know, the Farquharson brothers, the Padel School, they're doing a phenomenal job. Anyone listening, if you don't know who they are, definitely check them out, because they have an online kind of coaching platform, and it really is great. It's really inclusive.
They also have a podcast.
There you go. Go on, yeah. But yeah, like they, I think for me, there will come a point in padel where there will be more and more similarities in terms of centres in the UK. I think, you know, if we look at tennis, you've got high performance centres for kind of they have more advanced levels of the games. You also have clubs. So there are clubs kind of fit for purpose. And that's what I'd like to kind of bring, or feel I can bring to hopefully the Max Padel centres that I'm looking to open. But yeah, look, Apprentice has been amazing. Unfortunately, I didn't quite get all the way, and I won't be pushing forwards with Lord Sugar, but it's opened up some real good opportunities for me. I'm in really exciting conversations with investors. Still looking for land at the moment, but you know, I was fired a week and a half ago. It is action stations at the moment, and I'm having a blast.
I mean, you were saying you haven't slept.
I could do with a long sleep. Yeah. Yeah, TBC. I will I'll work on that one.
I think that's just the paddle industry at the moment. It's like so hot and like so fast moving.
Yeah.
I think anyone involved in the space, you're kind of like, I've just got to keep riding this wave and go with it at the speed that it's going almost.
Yeah, 100%.
And do you get that feeling?
100%. I feel like every day I'm looking and I'm seeing new centres popping up, and at the moment, the biggest challenge in the UK is that the supply can't meet the demand. Yeah. Right. So we've got
it's a nice problem.
It's a brilliant problem. It's a brilliant problem. And I think that's going to remain the case for some time. But my view is that that's fantastic for the sport. Yeah. You know, it would be really easy for me. I'm sat here saying I want to open my own centre. It'd be easy for me to be viewing that negatively, and like, you know, all these centres are opening, like that they're my competitors, but I don't really see it like that at all. I think, you know, there's space for everybody to be there at the moment. As a kind of padel community, we need to fill the void and make padel more inclusive than it is at the moment. And I think we're moving in the right direction.
And I mean, it was a really interesting insight. We had, we spoke with Alan Douglas on one of our podcasts, and he shared that, you know, they get the back end data off Playtomic, and he was saying that actually customers aren't really that loyal. They will play at like 3-4 different locations because there's different people, different experiences, you know, and a unique offering that each one brings to the table.
Yeah. And it's so difficult to get courts at the moment, especially if you're on a pay and play model. Like I often compare it to trying to get tickets for Glastonbury. You know, you're having to, I never thought I'd be there a week in advance of trying and book a paddle court
at midnight.
Yeah, but that is the situation at the moment. And I think people are desperate to play. You know, in the UK now, the weather's getting good, so a lot of the outdoor courts that weren't necessarily an option in the winter are now a viable option, which is great. But yeah, getting onto the court regularly is a bit of a challenge at the moment. So, you know, we need more centres to, as I said, fill that void.
And also, I mean, that's a really interesting point that you raise, and something that we discuss ourselves as a team, like managing that play and pay audience alongside your members. And I think we will always keep it in mind that, okay, we're going to pause memberships for a bit now, because you want the sport to be accessible and people to be able to get on court and try it. Like how do you see the market space should juggle that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And perhaps this is where padel is so different from tennis. I think most people know what tennis is as a sport. Yeah. So, you know, as you know, we've discussed, people don't necessarily know what padel is. So having an option to kind of dabble in the sport and see what it's all about at a centre that, you know, you can hire rackets from, hire balls from, maybe get some coaching at, but the barrier to entry of like a monthly membership or an annual membership is removed. That is only going to help get people into the sport. But yeah, it's a big balancing act, because if you're paying a membership for a club, you expect to be able to get court bookings. But you know, if you can't because of pay and play membership, you know, there are challenges there to be had. But for me, it's a reflection of, again, the fact that padel is booming and we don't have enough centres to satisfy the demand, and it's a good problem to have. But it's a fun time to be working in the padel industry.
And I'm loving your branding and your
Thank
logo
you.
right
Thank
now.
you. Yeah.
And did you have you spent a lot of time kind of shaping who you are and what your brand is going to be about, and how that is going to be presented in a club or across other platforms like merchandise? And
Yeah, absolutely. So my business is called Max Padel. I'm selling Max Padel rackets on Amazon. So I've got a 3K, a 12K and an 18K carbon fiber rackets, and they're selling really well. And yeah, I think one of the things I guess I'm most proud about from my experiences on The Apprentice is that I was really true to myself. Like I'm not a toxic person. You know, I don't really love confrontation. I will have confrontation if I need it. But I'm a no nonsense kind of guy, but I'm also a really kind guy. And I think the two can go hand in hand. And I think one of the things I'm proud of building my brand now with the kind of visibility I've had from The Apprentice is what you see is what you get. And, Max Padel is a reflection of me really. And yeah, proud of how it's all gone or going so far.
so if people want to buy a Max Padel racket, they can go to Amazon,
Absolutely.
but not right now because they're sold out.
Yeah, give me like 2 weeks. Yeah.
And reflecting on your time as a project manager in the show, what tasks did you find particularly challenging? And which ones did you enjoy the most?
Oh, let's go with the enjoyment ones because they're always more fun to remember. We were really fortunate. So 2 abroad trips we went on. We went to Austria in week 1 and Turkey in I think week 7.
Yeah.
They were standouts for me. They were amazing. In Turkey we went to Cappadocia. We were doing a corporate away day, so I was up in the clouds in a hot air balloon, which was phenomenal, absolutely beautiful. Definitely encourage anyone who's thinking about going there to go, because it was a real kind of once in a lifetime thing for me. Loved it. And Austria week 1, we were on our cycling around on our e-bikes in this beautiful Austrian countryside. So they're definitely the standouts for me. I think the other positive one that really springs to mind was week 8. So we had to create a hot sauce, and it was myself and Dean, and we were tasked with making the hottest hot sauce that we could possibly make, and it was hot. It was hot, and we just had a really fun day. I think the product probably wasn't. There were probably things about the product we would change in hindsight, but in terms of enjoyment, like I loved that task, and I thought I had so much fun along the way doing it, especially just being myself and Dean on that sub team. In terms of challenging tasks, week 3 was a difficult one for me. So it was my first time project managing. It was the discount buying task. I feel like we had a really good strategy at the beginning of the day, and things started to unravel as we went through. And I'm really proud of how I handled myself, and I kind of tried to adapt to the situation as the day went on. But yeah, we had some friction as part of the team, and it was a little bit of a difficult one for me to watch back. I don't think anyone, well, it's a strange scenario, right? Like, when do you ever see back arguments that you have? You never do, right? But I managed to survive that week, and it was myself and another candidate called Carlo that were kind of picked as a Max versus Carlo piece. It certainly wasn't like that, and I'm on really good terms with Carlo since then, but that was a tough week for me. And as I said, I survived it, but I really was close to going out on that week. And quite eye-opening how the apprentice journey, if you like, can end just like that, and thankfully it wasn't, and I managed to survive quite a long time after that. But I don't love that week. That's my my lower moment, I would say.
And is that because you hear that a lot about just reality shows in general? Like, quite a lot of the output is different due to editing. Would you say that now, when you look back at the episodes, that your experience is reflected accurately?
Yeah, I won't comment on the edit per se. I think what I'd say is that one of the things that we as 18 candidates have done really well is compartmentalize the show element, the business element, and the personal element of it. And actually week 3 is quite a good example of that. Like, Carlo and I are on really good terms, despite what the edit may look like.
There was a lot of tension.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But I also think when you're in an intense environment like that, you have to put it all on the table. And I would have regretted it had I not spoken up, and I think Carlo would have regretted it if he hadn't spoken up. So there's comfort in the fact that you have to fight your corner, and the outcome is whatever the outcome is, and I'm proud of it, and what an experience.
Yeah. And it's about business learnings. It's
Precisely.
a reality show about business learning. So
Yeah.
you're never going to always be in business or doing work with people that you get on with like a house or fire.
Exactly. And I think
It's about personalities, isn't it?
exactly. And remember, like The Apprentice, you're doing tasks that you've never done before, right? Like hot sauce. I've never made a hot sauce. Like, a corporate away day, like that's well, actually the corporate away day is in my locker, but there are other tasks like making an Easter egg. I've never made an Easter egg, right? Yeah. So it's about kind of adapting to the situation, doing the best that you can, and and hoping that is enough.
And in amongst those experiences, what can you see as bits that you'll be able to pick out and that might influence your approach to running your own business and leadership?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I don't necessarily know. I don't know whether The Apprentice has changed my outlook on that. I think it's been positive in terms of putting yourself out of your comfort zone as much as possible. It's been really good for that. I've had to do a lot of pitching, a lot of public speaking, which I am super comfortable with, but it's easy to get out of practice with those sort of things. Yeah. So going on The Apprentice and being able to experience things like that, like I was pitching to Levi Roots, like that would never happen, right?
Legend.
Yeah, absolute legend. So yeah, I think I'm really proud of putting myself out there and pushing myself and going outside of my comfort zone, and yeah, it was just all net positive from my perspective.
Yeah, and when that becomes like an everyday thing, actually you're going to be pretty successful in business because you're faced with a lot of that.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I think so. And it's about continually learning and pushing yourself. And I think as long as you're doing those things, hopefully success follows.
Yeah. And as part of your market research, because we also, like before you went on The Apprentice, like it was great. Like your socials were great. You were visiting lots and lots of clubs. Thank you for visiting us.
Absolutely.
But I'd love to know that when you were visiting all these clubs, in your mind, what distinguishes between a good club and a great club?
Yeah, again, it's a really good question. Well, for one, in the UK, I think it's really important to have indoor courts or an indoor option. I think we are so vulnerable to the UK weather. And in my opinion, padel's not quite like tennis. I think tennis, you can kind of grind out a wet, rainy day and still have fun and still be able to play, albeit with heavy soaked balls. But with padel, the ball behaves very differently off the glass, and just that alone really changes the dynamic of the sport. And, we've talked about the pay and play model. Often you have 24-hour plus cancellation policies. A lot of people don't want to play in the rain, so it can ruin that experience quite quickly when, you booked a court for Friday and on Thursday night, you don't know whether you need to cancel it or whatnot. But yeah, I think for me, what distinguishes a good club, I think, there's a huge social element. So having a good cafe, having a good bar area, having a good socializing space is really important. I play quite often at your centre in Bracknell. One of the things that's awesome about that place, amongst so many other things, is
Greg's gonna love that.
is the big speaker setup. Like it's very vibey when you're in the canopy setup. The sound travels, and it's a cool place to be. I don't think you really get that with tennis. Like there's a very kind of prim and proper way of doing things. I'm generalizing massively, but silence at Wimbledon, etc. Like padel's a bit different, and I think it's really exciting, particularly if you're coming in new to the sport. So yeah, for me, clubs need to be inclusive of all levels. The really good clubs are able to offer really good coaching, particularly towards the advanced levels of the game, and it just needs to be a fun, vibey place to be.
And beyond padel centres and padel rackets, do you have any other entrepreneurial ventures that you're passionate about pursuing, and are you happy to share it?
Yeah, absolutely. So my focus is Padel at the moment. So all of my entrepreneurial ventures are in Padel. Corporate days are the other things that I'm looking at the moment. So again, one of the things, big market, and again, it's a reflection of Padel being very new and trending, and people wanting to get involved in it. I think corporate days are screaming out for Padel, right? Padel and drinks afterwards, etc. Whatever it is that you want to do with it. So I'm exploring that quite seriously at the moment. But my main goal is to open my own Padel center. And
we're hoping that a lot of people that are just starting out on their entrepreneurial journey, or starting out, their ambition is to have a startup, will be listening in. So based on sort of your diverse experiences today, what advice would you be offering any individual listening to us right now?
Yeah, I guess two things. One, don't be afraid to get started. I think, certainly speaking from my own experience, I think sometimes you just need to take that first step. Sometimes that can be the hardest one to do. I think so many people have good ideas, but to bring it to fruition and to really start getting the wheels in motion can be the hardest thing. So my advice would be, like, take that first step, no matter how small it is. Just go for it. And then I guess my second one is, don't be afraid to fail. I think you hear it quite often, but it's so true. A lot of the learnings, particularly in entrepreneurship, are through learning to fail and failing fast and moving on quickly, right? So that they would be my bits of advice of get started and don't be afraid to fail.
And where do you look to for your learnings? Like, I am an avid podcast listener. I love reading a good business book as well. So how about for you? Is there a roadmap or a particular pod or a particular book you would guide someone to?
Yeah, there's a lot out there. There is a lot out there, and I love reading autobiographies. Shoe Dog is one of my favorite ones. So it's the story of how Nike was founded and how that started. I think another big favorite of mine is called A Ride of a Lifetime. I think that's again, similarly entrepreneurship, how Disney kind of overcame an area where it was struggling a little bit, and how they managed to turn that around and become very, very profitable very quickly. But I think for me, surrounding yourself with the right people is possibly more important than that. I think, you are a reflection of who you spend time with is my view. And if you're spending time with people who are pushing themselves out of their comfort zone and trying to do productive things, a lot of that will brush off on you. And I've been very fortunate in meeting some really amazing people. When I was at university, the people that I was living with in my first year were, I couldn't have got luckier. They were some of the most intelligent people that I've ever met. My wife being one of them as well. And I think surrounding myself with like-minded people who are pushing themselves has certainly helped me to get to where I am today.
That's a really great bit of advice.
Yeah, thanks.
And the time has flown. Unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap up. So I'd love to close on, how do you see the UK paddle scene evolving in the next 12 months? What are Max Padel's predictions?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I hope it continues on a similar trajectory to what we're seeing. The growth is phenomenal. I think we're on triple-digit growth year on year if you just look at courts alone. I think that will continue. So I'd like to see that happening more to help to satisfy that demand that isn't being met at the moment. And then I think once we start getting closer to that kind of saturation point, that's when things like coaching will become, I don't want to say more important because it's so important now, but when those things will also have had time to evolve and progress. And similarly with tournaments, like there are a lot of tournaments, LTA and FIT tournaments at the moment in the UK, but there's scope for more and more. And I know that LTA are working hard behind the scenes to bring that to fruition as well. And I think the way that it's graded, you have grades 1 to 6. So there are more kind of social events like Ola Padel is one. They're doing again more kind of, I guess, beers and paddle sort of thing. So I think Padel gives an opportunity, or there is an opportunity for things to continue progressing the way that they are. And as I said, like for me, and this was, I guess, one of my taglines going onto The Apprentice, I don't think there's ever been a more exciting, more investable time to be getting involved in Padel. And I think it's super exciting.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Lovely to have this conversation with you.
Thank you.
And I'm really looking forward to seeing what you'll be doing in the next 12 months, visiting your club. And thank you for tuning in today. And if you've enjoyed this conversation and you want to listen in and follow all things Padel, business, startups, well, you know what you need to do. Please hit follow and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next episode.